Hey all you cats and kittens and all you non-binary fittins, it's your boy DBiddles. Welcome to ChatBots. Now, I don't know if you've seen any of my previous videos, particularly my last one featuring Gao Gaigar, hint hint, but if not, that's cool, here's the drill. I build plastic robot toys, and I dispense with some talky talks regarding the various ideas and thoughts and musings rattling around inside my mostly empty skull. Usually starting with something regarding the figure I'm building, before moving on to a bigger topic. Sometimes it's serious stuff, sometimes it's frivolous stuff, sometimes it's a little bit of both. But hopefully you always find it entertaining. So to recap, I chat and I build bots, hence the name, ChatBots. Anyways, you probably already know who this is, but just humor me for a moment. Because while everybody knows who Optimus Prime and the Transformers are, I have points to make that need a framing device, and talking about the bot is how I springboard into my main topic. So just, let me cook for a few minutes, okay? I swear I'm going somewhere with this. I promise, once we start cooking, then we'll start booking, baby. Now, I'll spare you the basics because at this point, explaining in detail the conflict between the Autobots and the Decepticons and their war for supremacy over their home planet of Cybertron, it might as well be me recounting how Santa Claus delivers presents to every good little boy and girl on Christmas Eve. I'm sure you all kind of already know. And, truth be told, I've never been all that into Transformers anyways. I think they're neato in principle, but the Ninja Turtles were always more of my thing. I saw a couple of the Bayformers movies, and I caught a little bit of Beast Wars or Transformers Armada here and there while waiting for shows I actually wanted to watch to come on, but I probably couldn't tell you my shockwaves from my Sunstreakers. But getting into Mecha, I've certainly become more curious about the franchise. But anyways, just let me spend the next several minutes talking authoritatively about something that I only barely know about, and then we'll get to the good stuff. Transformers was the result of American toy company Hasbro licensing two pre-existing toy lines, Diaclone and Microchange, from Japanese toy company Takara Tomy, for distribution here in the States. Quick fun fact, Shoji Kawamori, the creator of the Macross series, actually designed the robots of the Diaclone line as well, meaning he designed Optimus here. Meaning that Optimus is distant cousins to the Valkyrie. Pretty neat, huh? Anyways, thanks to then-President Ronald Reagan, more on him later, deregulation of children's advertisement allowed for television programming that doubled as toy advertisements, and this had already proven quite lucrative for both He-Man and Hasbro's own G.I. Joe. It should be noted that Sunbow Entertainment, the co-producer of both the G.I. Joe and Transformers TV shows, originally started out as an advertising company. See, kids will buy cool toys, but they'll buy even more cool toys if there's a story behind the toys. Maybe one or two cool action figures is an impulse buy, but if you know who these action figures are and know that their adventures involve interacting with lots of other action figures, well then obviously you need those other ones too to reenact the fun at home. 1977's Star Wars had just blown everybody's socks off, and the shrewd acquisition of the toy rights by Kenner the year prior had led to them raking in massive profits off the name recognition. As I just mentioned, Hasbro had already been through all this with G.I. Joe, so after signing on with Takara, Hasbro got in touch with Marvel Entertainment Group, yes, the same company what Spider-Man comes from, and they all got to work developing a mythos for all these goofy transforming robots via a comic series and a cartoon. Comic superstars Jim Shooter and Denny O'Neil came up with the overall premise, with O'Neil renaming the robot known as Convoy to Optimus Prime. From there, Bob Budiansky did most of the heavy lifting in naming all the rest of the robots, fleshing out this premise and weaving this mythos into the greater Marvel 616 universe. That's right, the Transformers and the G.I. Joes used to be part of Marvel canon for just a little bit of time. And before too long, a bona fide international sensation was born. Funnily enough, there had already been another line of toy robots that transformed into vehicles that were actually rebranded and imported from Japan. Namely, Tonka's GoBots, which had originally been Popey's Machine Robo line. And while the GoBots were initially fairly successful, the Transformers would eventually steamroll their robot competitors, and Tonka and all their intellectual property would be purchased by Hasbro in 1991. Hasbro, in fact, actually has a lot of IPs under their brand, including Dungeons & Dragons, My Little Pony, Jem and the Holograms, Fortnite, Nerf, Power Rangers, Magic the Gathering, Beyblade, PJ Masks, The Littlest Pet Shop, Milton Bradley, Parker Brothers, Playskool, and Ghostbusters. Now, one of the few pieces of Transformers media that I have consumed, and in fact have had multiple viewings of, is Transformers the movie. No, not that stupid Shia LaBeouf one, the one from 1986. You know, the one that was stupid independent of Michael Bay's influence. Now, I'm not about to tell you that Transformers the movie is good, actually. In fact, in all honesty, it's a mess as a coherent narrative, and the characters are all about as flat as the animation cells that they're drawn on. But it is weirdly charming in a lot of ways. It was good enough that after seeing Transformers Revenge of the Fallen in theaters back in high school, my buddy Jeremy insisted on us watching it so we could compare our recent theatrical experience to this superior one from 2 decades prior. And I must admit, I got a kick out of it. Between its really visually appealing animation and design, courtesy of collaborations between Toei, Marvel, and Sunbow Productions, to the pumping soundtrack which featured all kinds of wild hair metal, prog rock, and Weird Al Yankovic tracks, to some excellent vocal performances from series mainstays like Peter Cullen and Frank Welker and Scatman Crothers, the last of whom sadly passed away shortly after film's release, but also roles played by Eric Idle, Leonard Nimoy, and Orson Welles, the last of whom also sadly passed away shortly after release. Welles in particular, whatever his opinion of the franchise, definitely adds a lot of gravitas to the film's primary antagonist, the planet-consuming galactic horror known as Unicron. And despite the ineptitude with which the narrative handles its own ideas, the film does have a really strong premise for the franchise. Almost all of the familiar faces of the cast up until that point, most notably Optimus here, are killed in the film's initial battle, leaving a newer generation of heroes to take up the fight in their place, now faced with odds far greater than anything the old cast ever had to deal with. Which is, at the very least, a pretty bold, compelling, and decidedly daring move for a children's franchise. But the film was quite heartily panned by critics and received mixed reception from fans in its day. And this plot point, as gutsy and interesting as it was one of the central points of contention. And now we're getting to it. You see, for critics, not only were there a bunch of dumb cartoon robots clogging up the cast, none of whom are particularly well characterized even if you had been privy to the 65 episodes of animated series leading up to that point, but a whole bunch of them die horribly in the first 20 minutes of the film. And then the audience is expected to give a shit about all these figures who they barely knew, dying in a very clear, blatant stunt to get children to buy all the toys of the new characters who were only now just being introduced here in this film. And their introduction was hence marred and obviously overshadowed by the mass corporate execution of their predecessors. Yeah, remember how I said that from the inception, the whole show and comic series had just been an obvious and overly long commercial for toys? Well, how else do you convince your target demo that they need an all-new set of toys, if not apparently by unceremoniously murdering all of their old ones with almost gleeful contempt for any sentiment that the audience might have had for them? Optimus in particular was a pretty devastating loss, as his mortal wound is caused by the interference of one of the new characters the kids were meant to latch onto and buy toys of, namely Hot Rod, interfering in a battle, leading to Optimus getting cheap-shotted by his rival Megatron. Megatron incidentally only dies as a result of his own Decepticon flunkies seizing upon a moment of weakness to perform a coup, voting him out of command, and then jettisoning him out of an airlock, whereupon Unicron revitalizes him into his henchman Galvatron. So, you know, the good guy gets got, and the bad guy gets upgraded into a more powerful bad guy. Insult to injury, that is. And then, seeing Optimus being taken to an infirmary bed to watch the light slowly fade from his eyes, as all of his friends tearfully beg him to hold on, while the physician on staff grievously informs them that there's nothing that can be done to save him. Yeah, you can see how then having to sit through another 70 minutes of a movie at that point after having to seriously confront mortality for the first time really put a bunch of little kids off their appetite for more Transformers toys. The death of Optimus is a pretty interesting phenomenon in retrospect. In a way, it both reinforces and rejects the premise of using media to indoctrinate children into purchasing merchandise. On the one hand, they had done their job so well that the audience became emotionally attached to this figure, to the point where even his fictional death led some fans to be so allegedly distraught over the event that they would, no joke, lock themselves in their rooms at home, refusing to come out for weeks over the grief they felt over the loss of a fictional surrogate father figure. And deluges of hate mail from fans and/or their parents certainly had the execs in a tizzy. They had succeeded in making Optimus real to this generation of kids. The most credit for that, of course, lies at the feet of the individual creators of the media that had been built up to that point, and not the corporate executives who mandated it. It was thanks to O'Neill and Shooter and Budiansky. It was thanks to Peter Cullen, who had voiced Optimus. It was thanks to the screenplay of Ron Friedman and the direction of Nelson Shin. It was thanks to so many animators, voice actors, series writers, composers, character and mech designers, etc., that this series resonated with so many children. Yet on the other hand, they failed to replicate this success in selling a new cast in this film. Their attempts to sell the next set of toys hadn't been quite the rousing success the executives had hoped for, leading to Hasbro floundering with their Transformers toy gimmicks for the next few years, and leading to the TV show having to backpedal and resurrect Optimus in the final episode of Transformers Season 4, which proved to be 33 episodes too late, as the American Transformers craze cooled down substantially to the point where Season 4 of the original Transformers series only had 3 episodes, and the revamping of the toy gimmick with the Headmaster series failed to gain much traction, at least here in America. The film itself was also a box office bomb, only able to gross about $6 million on its $5 million budget. And yet, this mythos, this brand, this iconography of children's ephemera persists to this day, warping itself around this movie to a point where the film maintains a strong hold on the fandom, and the death and resurrection of Optimus has ingrained itself as such an emotional high point that it's been a recurring plot point in the franchise's many incarnations, sometimes even happening multiple times in the same continuity.
See thou, where the fusion cannon pierced mine side. Touch the laser marks in mine hands, and know that I am Prime, who did die for thine sins.
Despite the film being a bomb, and despite the American side of the franchise seeing a little bit of a recession, it had still made too much money thus far to simply put it out to pasture for too long. Transformers not only continued in the form of animation over in Japan with sequel series like Headmasters, Super God Master Force, and Transformers Victory, but in the form of reboots and spin-offs like Beast Wars, Beast Machines, Transformers Prime, the Unicron Trilogy, the Bay films, Transformers Animated, Rescue Bots, and literally so many others. Optimus and many of his pop culture contemporaries prove that when you have a hit, it can become an unkillable perennial source of profit for generations to come, buoyed by the nostalgia held by older fans who carry on the enthusiasm both as fans and as the next generation of creators for the next generation of fans.
That is not dead which can eternally be rebooted, and with strange aeons, even Brandeth may die.
Transformers now sits as the 13th highest grossing media franchise in the world, with a total gross of $25 billion. And only about a fifth of that $25 billion with a B is movie ticket sales from the 8 theatrical films thus far, meaning that's a whole lot of toys and associated merch. Alright, enough bots, let's talk some shop. Strap in, because this one might have some more innocence-shattering revelations than just the murder of your favorite cartoon characters. A number of episodes ago, during my build of Shin Getter Robo, I was talking about how Hollywood has really embraced the trend of readapting and rebooting a lot of beloved franchises. You can see this in the ubiquity of media connected to Star Wars, Marvel and DC superheroes, He-Man, Harry Potter, Disney, My Little Pony, Scooby-Doo, and just so many other franchises that are kept alive as reliable sources of revenue. And I was making a case for why the forthcoming Hollywood adaptations of many anime and manga titles isn't necessarily a bad thing for those who are fans of them and those who might become fans of them. But at one point I uttered this line, and I quote, "You put a Ninja Turtle or a Batman in it, and I'm going to fucking watch it. I'm a nerd. I'm a dork. That basically means that I'm a walking piggy bank for whoever owns the IPs that I like. Don't pretend like you're not the same. Don't pretend like you don't have things that you soy face over whenever another iteration of that thing is announced." Another thing I said in that same video was, quote, "The people investing money into this stuff aren't interested in producing art, they're interested in producing profit. As far as they're concerned, art is just an occasional accidental byproduct of this process. The people who actually work on this stuff are sincerely trying, but their output is beholden to the desires of the people signing the checks." And hey, that was certainly true in Transformers now, wasn't it? Now, those statements are a little bit hyperbolic. I don't really consume every piece of Batman and Ninja Turtles merchant media that comes out. After all, I need to sleep and eat and use the toilet sometimes, and I find that I can only pay so close attention to what's going on with Batman while bits of Chipotle burrito keep dropping into my comic books. But I stand by those sentiments, so let's explore it a little further because I think it has implications that we in our content and media-saturated age kinda just gloss over. I want you, my cuddly and lovable viewers, to think about how you would describe yourself to a group of strangers to help them get to know you more. Say you're starting a new class, say you're starting a new job, say you're filling out a dating profile, whatever. Now, they can see you, so you don't need to explain what you look like, you don't need to describe your physical characteristics or your gender identity, and they either already know or have no need to know your sexual orientation. Alright? So, what do you say about you and your personality to give someone a shorthand of what you're all about? Let me give you an example of what I would likely say. "Hi, my name is DBiddles. I'm a husband and father. I work at such and such company. My favorite color is red, and I like such and such food, music, and movies, and some of my favorite hobbies are X, Y, and Z." A little basic, but does that sound reasonably similar to what you might say? Probably pretty close, right? Did you notice how one of the primary things by which we help to craft our identities is things we like? It kinda just springs to mind as something helpful that can reliably convey to someone key parts of you and how you think. Which isn't a bad thing by any means. Liking stuff shows what you're passionate about, what you have an affinity for. I myself make it a habit to like a few things here and there, you might have noticed. How many relationships are made over common interest in this type of book, or that type of show, or this type of activity or experience? Probably part of how well you get along with some people is based on how closely your interests and affinities align, how much common ground you share in terms of appreciating the same leisurely activities. You get along well with your neighbors and coworkers, but you get along even better with and gravitate towards those among them who share your enthusiasm for certain things. Fandom can transcend demographic borders. Fandom connects us. Fandom informs how we approach new ideas and concepts. Fandom is a part of our identity. But that's kind of wild, right? How you're using some thing or good or service or idea that is completely separate from your personhood to help define you. And as I alluded to earlier, how often for you is that thing that you resonate with some kind of product that's owned by some company? I know it'll come as a shock to you after me having spent umpteen minutes now not only building a cartoon robot toy, but also talking about their history and then having also expressly said so, but I am a geek. Gasp, shock and awe, say it isn't so. I know. Hi, my name is DBiddles. I'm a husband and father. I work at such and such company. My favorite color is red, and I like Hot Wings, System of a Down, the Gorillaz, and some of my favorite hobbies are comics, anime, video games, monster movies, and fantasy roleplay. And those are all basically just products that I consume. Yes, they're art technically, they're things that are created by passionate, creative individuals trying to communicate wonderful and enriching ideas and narratives, but they're art that is owned by very big companies and created for the express purpose of profit. Either the profit of the artist, or as is more often the case, the profit of the people who own the brand or IP. Artists create because they like it and they have thoughts and ideas and stories they want to share. They want to get paid, but that's only because they need the money to live and continue creating. But the companies that own these IPs don't care about creating, they just want to make profit and invest in artists only as a means of producing something they can profit off of. And as we've seen with those writers and actor strikes, if they could get away with just having machines churn out garbage content for us and still make lots of money off it, they absolutely would. And very frequently anymore, these artworks that the creatives are working on are being commissioned specifically to make use of intellectual properties that are proven earners, that are a reliable source of profit. For example, I like Gundam. Gundam was the brainchild of Yoshiyuki Tomino, who is an individual, and it was brought to life by him and a group of like-minded creatives, just as every subsequent iteration of Gundam is the work of some many talented and enthusiastic people. But Gundam is owned by Studio Sunrise and Bandai, and those companies themselves are likely owned by even bigger conglomerates. They commission new Gundam series, fund and produce new Gundam toys, anime, manga, and video games, all to serve their bottom line. My supply of Gundam comes from and exists to the benefit of those companies who are cognizant of and ever interested in my willingness to spend more money on Gundam. Part of who I am is a Gundam fan, and a company owns, or maybe leases, just a tiny piece of me, of my identity. And they make bank off it, not just for me, obviously, but many, many others. A company owns tiny pieces of a great many people. In fact, let's just think about the whole creation of Gundam for just a second. The only reason it happened is because someone somewhere said, "Make me a show that kids will watch so we can sell it to a network. Make it have this many episodes and make each episode this long, with this many spaces in it so the network can sell ad space so those ads can sell stuff to the viewers. Make the show itself something that can be turned into stuff the kids will want to buy. I don't know, maybe make it have robots and space battles? Kids love those things. Oh, that show sold a lot of stuff? Well, let's make more of that show so we can sell even more stuff." It happened to have a certain level of greater artistry to it due to the people working on it, and maybe that artistry is what the audience responded to, but it's still kind of weird that it was a product first and foremost and was intended to appeal to those of us who are most impressionable. Children. Children are the marks. Hey, let's look at another thing I like an awful lot. Batman. Now, Batman was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger, by which I mean Bob Kane came up with the name, and then Bill Finger came up with the little stuff, the costume, the backstory, most of the early supporting characters, and the lore, just little insignificant things like that. Batman was a character created in the image of many pulp characters of the time, such as the Shadow, the Phantom, Green Hornet, etc. And he fell into the wave of superheroes that started emerging in the wake of Superman. Comics back then were a source of cheap, printed entertainment, and they were carried pretty heavily by ad sales, by companies purchasing a few pages in each comic book for the sake of plastering ads on them, in the hopes of hooking the readers into buying the advertised products. But obviously, the draw to comics wasn't the ads, it was the stories. Stories that very frequently neglected to credit their work-for-hire creators, who usually forfeited their rights to the characters that they created. In fact, the creators of Superman, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, both died basically broke, as did Bill Finger. Batman has grown to be worth as much as all those advertised products he helped to sell, just as his fan base has grown both in reach and in age demographic. The kids who love Batman grew up to be adults who continue loving Batman, and Batmania has spread to all kinds of people, not just those who connected with him at a young age. But he definitely holds a special place in the hearts of those who got in on Batman from an early age, not unlike Gundam. Batman is owned by DC Comics. DC Comics is part of DC Entertainment. DC Entertainment is owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. David Zaslav and Samuel De Piazza are the president and CEO and the chairman of Warner Discovery, respectively. They don't own Warner Discovery, though. The majority shares of Warner Discovery are owned by Advanced Publications, the Vanguard Group, and BlackRock, which are all investment firms who buy little parts of the company with the hopes that their little parts will be worth more year over year as part of the company's financial success. Though none of these people have much creative impact on how their various media properties are created, they just kind of tell the people who work for them what to make and how and when it's made, and they profit quite heartily off that work. In 2022, Warner Discovery saw $33.8 billion in revenue. Now, according to Wikipedia, link in the description, Batman is the 11th highest grossing global media franchise of all time at time of recording, with a total of $29.6 billion grossed over time. Last year's film, The Batman, was filmed on a budget of around $200 million and grossed $771 million at the box office, meaning the net profit of that film alone is over $570 million. With me so far? This movie that cost $200 million to make, cost $200 million in materials, labor, advertising, etc., made all that money back and an additional $570 million on top of that in movie ticket sales alone. Movie ticket sales in the streaming era, mind you, where everyone knows that if you wait like 2 months, it'll show up on the streaming service you have a monthly subscription to. And that's just movie ticket sales too. That's not accounting for Blu-ray and DVD sales, HBO Max subscriptions, and associated merch that also surely command a hefty sum of money. So, who gets that extra $570 million? The movie paid for itself, no problem. That $200 million cost is covered now. The actors got their salaries, likely pretty substantial ones for the most prominent performers, and they probably have residuals coming for merch and home release sales. The physical stuff that they needed to make the movie is paid for. The personnel, camera operators, makeup, props, costuming, VFX artists, set design, script writers, director, craft services, etc., those have all been paid. The director likely also entitled to some residuals. Bob Kane and Bill Finger are both dead. Bill Finger was denied most of the credit he deserved until long after his death, and Bob Kane, having died almost 20 years later, doing okay for himself and eventually admitting to having taken credit for a lot of the work done by Finger and a number of other artists. But surely their families get some residuals too, or hopefully they do. Batman's mythos, though, from which this film drew inspiration from, consists of many disparate stories and elements. In particular, director Matt Reeves cites Batman The Long Halloween, Batman Year One, and Batman Earth One as big sources of inspiration for this film. However, the countless writers, pencilers, inkers, etc. who have built up Batman's legends over the time, the things that this movie drew inspiration from, were likely only paid for their comic book work and are not entitled to residuals for either reprints of their comics or adaptations of their comics. The people who worked on the movie were already paid. All those Batman stories are just property that the studio, that the company, can use in building their next product. All of them just more Bill Fingers. So, who gets that remaining cash? I'll leave that one for you to think on. 2022's The Batman is just one of thousands of different Batman products released since the character's creation in 1939. Over 80 years after his creation, he's still getting more stories told and more toys produced. Batman is an intellectual property, a commodity, something that is bought and sold for profit. a lot of these intellectual properties eventually end up being acquired by bigger companies that consolidate lots of brands and IPs. Warner Discovery not only owns Batman and the rest of the DC multiverse, including all the various rival publishers DC itself consolidated, but it also owns Harry Potter and Game of Thrones and Cartoon Network and Hanna-Barbera and Looney Tunes and Nightmare on Elm Street and Lord of the Rings and The Matrix and Mortal Kombat and possibly King Kong? Over time, a lot of these disparate IPs come to fall into fewer and fewer hands, like some kind of huge, all-consuming galactic horror, but for ideas. I think I mentioned one of those already. The Batman already has a sequel lined up, as does the spin-off film 2019's Joker. And Batman was used heavily to market the Flash movie, though it didn't do that film much good. And Batman has another set of movies announced starting with Batman the Brave and the Bold, as part of the relaunched DC Cinematic Universe. And he's featured in a half dozen or so monthly comics. And all kinds of games, television, cartoon, clothing, toys, accessories, and general merchandise with his brand on it. Everyone needs a wallet, and at least some of those people are going to choose to purchase a wallet with Batman on it rather than just a plain old boring wallet. Everyone needs blankets, and surely some of those people would prefer to wrap themselves up in the warm, cottony embrace of a blanket featuring the Caped Crusader rather than other blankets. Everyone needs shower curtains, and should you decide to have the Dark Knight keeping an ever-vigilant eye out for Norman Bates types while you wash, there are Batman shower curtains available for purchase. Batman dishware, Batman stationery, Batman shoes and shoelaces, Batman car accessories, Batman for infants and toddlers, Batman makeup, Batman cereal and pasta. If you can think it, someone somewhere has put a Batman on it. These things exist because someone figures that there's a decent number of Batman fans out there who will buy it if it's manufactured. Maybe they already even have some of this stuff without Batman on it, but when presented with the option to replace their stuff with one that does have Batman on it, they'll buy one they don't need for the sake of having more Batman. Batman's stories have been told and retold for coming up on a century now. Batman doesn't just sell ads, he gets featured in them too. Batman is an ad that advertises other ads. Everyone complains about how Hollywood has run out of ideas, but in truth, Batman sells more tickets and merch than original ideas like Brendan Fraser's The Whale, or Cocaine Bear, or Megan, or The Northman, or Violent Night. By virtue of his immense profitability, a constant stream of Batman content is constantly being churned out, whether or not there's anything meaningful to say in every one of those stories. Now, what is and isn't meaningful is arbitrary, I grant you, but how many stories do you know that stretch on long past the point where they have anything cool or insightful to say, simply due to their obligation to continue generating wealth? The Simpsons, anybody? Sure, eventually some of that new content ends up being worthwhile by the simple principle that any result is not only possible but statistically inevitable given enough opportunities. But some of it, possibly even a lot of it, is simply just more of the same, is simply mediocre, uninspired, and often downright bad. I've read and seen a lot of Batman stories, and as much as I like him, a fair number of those stories didn't need to exist or weren't terribly memorable. A fair number of them are just more for the sake of having more. A fair number of them exist simply because they knew that I would buy them regardless of whether or not the people who made them really had a story that they were actually passionate about telling. Now I want you to think about how many cool stories and series that flew under the radar that were smart or unique or challenging or amazing, but were underappreciated, drowned out by the ceaseless noise of more popular, more profitable media. How many of them went unfinished, had unfulfilled potential, were lacking in closure, not because the people who were creating them lost interest, but because the companies that owned them weren't seeing the financial success they hoped for, and thus chose to invest that money elsewhere, chose to channel that funding into more profitable, more mainstream media. Maybe some of those projects will someday find some small amount of closure in a reboot or a revival project. Maybe. You know, maybe. If the companies that own them think that they might be able to squeeze a satisfactory amount of cash out of said revival. How soon do you think we'll see a GoBots revival now that Hasbro owns the IP? Do you think Hasbro will want to offer audiences a competing toy robot line to their golden goose, the Transformers? Or are they just going to sit on GoBots, squashing the hope of any fan or creative who might have wanted to see more of that robot show that they might have liked equally or liked even more than the Transformers? After all, if you're not permitted to continue on infinitely, you'll miss out on all the best outcomes possible as well as all the worst outcomes possible. Kinda sucks that this stuff can't just manifest organically out of genuine passion and love, but out of calculated profit-seeking. But hey, the familiar tends to sell better. Who cares if something potentially revolutionary gets sacrificed as a result? Batman's only the 11th highest grossing brand out there. The 10 above him at time of writing in ascending order are Call of Duty, Harry Potter and the Wizarding World, the MCU, which is distinguished as separate from the broader Marvel brand, Barbie, that recent Warner Brothers co-produced movie probably didn't hurt, the Japanese children's media franchise Anpan Man, Disney Princesses, Winnie the Pooh, Star Wars, Mickey Mouse and Friends, and the number one, Pokemon, who according to Wikipedia at time of recording has grossed roughly $88 billion globally. And aside from Mickey and Pooh Bear, all of those franchises started many, many years after Batman, meaning their annual rate of income is many degrees higher than Batman's. Batman, who is the single most popular DC superhero by far, and one of the most recognizable pop culture figures in all the world, is getting smoked by Pikachu, who's had 50 less years of existence than him. And they are able to generate these insane sums of money off the backs of the people who make their media and merch, and those of us who continue to reliably gobble that shit up. Notice, 5 of those names are owned by Disney. And so much of that stuff, if not all of it, is marketed specifically to, or can be primarily marketed to, children. By all accounts, former President Ronald Reagan is not the devil. However, it's noteworthy that Ronald Reagan and the Prince of Darkness have never been seen in the same room together, and any evidence that you could produce that would indicate that Ronald Reagan wasn't actually Satan in disguise could be countered with the argument, yeah, well, that's precisely the sort of thing the devil would do to throw people off his tracks. As mentioned previously, one of the many fun things that Reagan did while in office, besides stoking the drug wars, ignoring the AIDS epidemic, popularizing trickle-down economics, setting the template for Republican politics that is still used to this day, and participating in / masterminding the Iran-Contra affair. Seriously, how is this guy not Satan, guys? Anyways, one particular fun thing he did was a whole lot of corporate deregulation. He took a bunch of laws and rules that limited what big businesses could and couldn't do to make money, usually laws and rules meant to protect the well-being of workers and customers, and he just pitched them out the window. He passed legislation that rolled back a couple restrictions here and there so that businesses could make even more money. Remember, this was the guy who championed trickle-down economics, a theory that, at this point, I feel we can all agree doesn't actually trickle down all that well. And again, the one particular form of deregulation that is relevant to our story here is that he removed regulations on children's television programming that strictly monitored the types of messaging that was featured in kids' TV and prevented lots of overt advertising to children within the shows that kids would watch. Kids are very impressionable, very prone to influence, and easily susceptible to shiny new plastic trinkets with bright colors. An unscrupulous person with plastic trinkets to sell could pretty easily convince a child to want them if they told a compelling enough story, right? How toys used to work was you just got a bunch of random ones, and you just kinda played pretend with whatever you have. A robot here, a dinosaur there, a cowboy, a lion, a few trucks, some plastic army men, a little of this, a little of that. Throw them all in an imagination stew, and you get the Adventures of Cyborg Bill and Jeffrey the Magic Talking Lion. But with a TV show, that's not Cyborg Bill, Mom. Ugh, so lame. Why would I bother to make up my own stories when someone's already made one up and sold it to me as a brand? That's Optimus Prime, leader of the Autobots. And according to the lyrics of that helpful theme song of that show I watched, Autobots wage their battle to destroy the evil forces of the Decepticons. Mom, can we get Megatron? Optimus has to have someone to fight. And we need Jazz, who is Optimus's friend. And Ratchet, and Bumblebee, and RC. Oh man, Megatron's really outnumbered now. Guess we gotta add to the Christmas list. So let's get Starscream, and Soundwave, and Skywarp, and Thundercracker, and... After Reagan's deregulation, or should we call it dereganation? No, probably not. After that, a whole lot of cartoons started popping up that were intended specifically to push lines of toys. He-Man, G.I. Joe, Strawberry Shortcake, My Little Pony, Ninja Turtles, Jem and the Holograms, Voltron, Thundercats, Super Mario Bros. Super Show, She-Ra, Centurions, Visionaries, Bravestar, Inhumanoids, Mask, Micro Machines, Sectars, Dinosaurs, Jason the Wheeled Warriors, Silverhawks, Transformers, More Than Meets the Eye, Transformers, Commercialism in Disguise. There were even lots of cartoons promoting movies or properties that wouldn't normally be appropriate for children, but were toned down for Saturday morning viewing so that they could maybe move some action figures. RoboCop, Rambo, Conan, Mr. T, Toxic Avenger, Beetlejuice, Ghostbusters, The Mask, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, James Bond Jr., Alien, Predator. You ever notice how so many of the enduring franchises that get rebooted in the here and now are ones that got their start in the 80s? Do you think that there might be something to that? Can you honestly tell me 100% that you have not been conditioned and groomed from childhood to perpetually buy toys, memorabilia, movie tickets, video game sequels, comic books, etc.? Can you honestly tell me that that is not the case for you and all of this is 100% your choice? Because thinking about it myself, I don't know that I can. Because regardless of what you think of all that stuff, a lot of people persist in liking it well beyond childhood. I mean, maybe you're not still playing with toys, but I bet you still buy Funko Pops or Hero Clicks or McFarlane toy statues or something else that you purchase and then you set on a shelf without ever removing it from the box. Knowing that Transformers was from the start basically just a commercial to sell you toys doesn't change the fact that for one reason or another, it's stuck with people for years and years. It has lots of artists involved in its creation. O'Neill, Shooter, Budiansky, Shin, Friedman, Cullen, Welker, Crothers, Wells, Kawamori, and so many others I couldn't begin to list. Artists create from themselves so that they can make works that resonate with others, that inspire and uplift and engage and enrich others. But they also need money. They can't just create stuff if they're not able to afford food and homes and shit. But how much of that $25 billion that Transformers has grossed do you think they actually got? Hasbro, incidentally, generated $5.86 billion in revenue just last year. The majority shares of Hasbro are owned by the Vanguard Group, Capital Research Global Investors, BlackRock, and former chairman and CEO of Hasbro, Alan G. Hassenfeld. Hey, a couple of those groups sound familiar. It's kind of fucked up that art and artists are being exploited for their ability to emotionally connect with an audience for the sake of massive profits off of selling more and more merch of the same characters. And somehow, you and I are still buying all these goofy toys despite not really playing with them. Hey, remember how I said Pikachu was eating everybody's lunch with over $88 billion generated since 1996? More than Mickey Mouse and Pooh Bear, who both started in the 1920s? Let's look at Pokemon for just a second. What's that series' tagline again? Gotta catch 'em all, right? Pretty compelling for a 10-year-old who maybe doesn't fit in at school, right? Life isn't too hard yet, and this Pokemon thing is everything you could ever want. Neon-colored dinosaurs and unicorns with superpowers that want to be your best pal. Perfect thing for you to hyperfixate on. Want to be a Pokemon master? Want to at least show up your friends? What kind of self-respecting master hasn't caught 'em all? All 151 of them. Sorry, 251. Sorry, 386. Sorry, I've been out of the loop on Pokemon for a minute. Let me just... Alright, there we go. All 1015 Pokemon and counting. Well, each new game has all of those Pokemon on... No, wait, sorry. There are some Pokemon that can only be found on Red version, and some that can only be found on Blue version, and you have to trade between them to get the remaining ones. Or else, you could buy a second video game. And that's to say nothing of Pokemon Go, Pokemon Snap, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Pokemon Rumble, Pokemon Ranger, the cards, the plushies, the plastic toys, etc. Maybe you were a master for like a second back in Gen 5, but now it's Gen 9, fool. Are you still a master? And how much of your allowance has gone into this particular hobby at this point? How much of that $88 billion did you contribute?
Good thing I'm not a nerd, DBiddles. What a sad life you must live with your stupid cartoons and toys.
Yeah, no, totally. It's not like cars have brands, or music is owned by the record labels, or sports teams are bought and sold and traded, or home electronics get new models made every year with incremental changes and artificial obsolescence baked in, or that all the groceries or clothes you can buy are in some way connected to one of only about a dozen companies. You're right. Good thing you're not a nerd who makes consumption of commercial goods a part of their identity. Actually, let's talk about clothes for just a second. Now you can't see it right now, but I'm wearing a Street Fighter t-shirt. Street Fighter is owned by Capcom, and this shirt comes from this company called Homage, or Homage, that my wife bought it from as a gift for me. Not only are those companies basically holding the reins to the things that I enjoy, Street Fighter, not only are those companies responsible for selling me a product that protects me from the elements, clothing, but I'm kind of also acting as an advertisement for them now. Hey, like my shirt? You can get one just like it from Homage. Hey, you like Street Fighter? It's a cool game. I'm a customer testimony to how much fun Street Fighter is to play. You can buy Street Fighter to play for yourself. I recommend it. You can tell by my t-shirt. And you notice how the attire that most frequently features brand and characters, that features graphics that goofy fans will buy and wear proudly, are most frequently t-shirts? T-shirts which are extremely cheap to make and are not of long-lasting quality. T-shirts which would normally be an unimpressive and totally disposable piece of attire, which can very easily have a graphic slapped on it and then suddenly can be valued at 5 to 10 times the normal asking price just because there's a logo or catchphrase or character on it now. I know that I myself wouldn't keep adding to my current collection of roughly 60 or 70 some odd t-shirts if I didn't keep finding new ones with pictures of my favorite stuff on them. Given how frequently I'm either at work in a uniform or just at home in pajamas, I'd probably only have about 10 t-shirts if I didn't have some kind of compulsive need to adorn myself with kitschy sci-fi monsters and superhero insignias. I like Street Fighter so much that not only am I willing to pay for the privilege of enjoying it, not only am I willing to pay for new installments every couple years with minor gameplay tweaks and changes, but I'm also willing to pay for the privilege of advertising that I enjoy it by buying a t-shirt. Willing to pay for more junky clothes that I don't need. I'm paying for the opportunity to non-verbally acknowledge my allegiance to the Street Fighter brand for everyone around me to see. Maybe with a shirt, maybe with a hat, maybe with a belt buckle, maybe with a special pair of officially licensed Converse shoes, maybe with socks, maybe with car decals, etc. And fuck, my entire channel is also an advertisement for the various mecha shows and their associated merch that I assemble on screen. Street Fighter, incidentally, is on the list of highest grossing media franchises too, in the number 34 spot. And Gundam took number 63. And my beloved Ninja Turtles? 23. Though maybe the new movie Mutant Mayhem will nudge it up a bit higher on the list. And it's not really my fault that I like all this stuff. Liking stuff is good, actually. It's made to be liked. But it does kind of feel like maybe I've been conditioned to crave it and continuously indulge in it. It does kind of feel like it's made to be addictive. You know, if they suddenly stopped making more Batman or Ninja Turtles, I might be sad, but I'd probably be able to carry on without any new stuff and just enjoy the old stuff that I already had. I mean, there's lots of stuff that I like that I probably won't ever see any more of. There probably won't ever be any more Project A-Co or Calvin and Hobbes or Ed, Edd n Eddy or The Owl House. And does that make me sad? Sure. Would I be stoked if there were more? You bet your ass. But I don't need more. I can just enjoy what there is and be happy with it. And some stuff I don't actually want more of. I loved BoJack Horseman, but I don't think any more would really be good or necessary. I loved The Iron Giant, but who knows if a sequel would be any good. We waited how many years for a sequel to The Incredibles, but how good was it actually? Do we really want another one? I'm okay, honestly. But if they made another one tomorrow, would I want to see it? Yeah, probably. Nobody was really asking for more Game of Thrones after that ending, but here we are, and here we have House of the Dragon. And when there's inevitably more Batman or Ninja Turtles, the Pavlovian part of my brain just reacts and I buy it. I've been trained to be a good little consumer pet. Hey, how soon do you think before they try to remake the original Star Wars trilogy? Because you know that's gonna happen eventually. Don't kid yourself into thinking that they would never do it. In order to have all these things, in order to be able to experience and enjoy these products, I work a retail job. It's not glamorous, it doesn't pay particularly well, it's often very stressful and demands a lot of hard physical labor, not to mention so much of my finite time on this mortal coil. But it's important work. Everyone needs stuff, and I work as a part of a team that helps distribute that stuff to the people who need it. It's a big team. There's a lot of us involved in the distribution of stuff for our community. Stuff to continue existing, stuff to make that existence tolerable, stuff to make that existence as pleasant as possible. Nobody asks to exist, but existing and existing as pleasantly as possible should be an inalienable right. Or at least, I think so. Forcibly denying people that right to be happy and enjoy life rather than be miserable or bored seems immoral to me. And the stuff that makes me happy, besides food, shelter, and physical, social, and emotional fulfillment, is all my little nerd things. My toys, t-shirts, and media. All the dumb stuff I've kind of been conditioned to crave. If I just had food in a house and I couldn't afford to fill my free time with the stuff that makes my life worth living, the stuff that brings me joy, that would feel basically like prison. Life is not merely toil. It should include art and music and recreation and personal fulfillment. And the people who create that art for money are just as important as the people who provide food, clothing, and shelter. It seems to me we could have a society where everybody just exists and does what they're good at for each other. But people are only allowed to get stuff if they have money. And in order to get money, people are apparently required to work for the companies that own the stuff. People make the stuff, and the companies just own all that stuff that they make. And then they sell the stuff to people. You can't just get stuff, the company doesn't like that. Companies wouldn't exist if you could just have stuff. Because companies aren't really people, there's something separate. Selling stuff makes lots of money. In order to buy the stuff that my company sells, I have to work for that company. I don't get lots of money. The company makes $1 and I make pennies. I have to sell myself to my company so I can buy from my company or other similar companies the stuff that I need to continue existing as pleasantly as possible. The companies that own all the wonderful things that make me happy also have lots of people like me working for them, making only a fraction, only a small tiny portion of the total income grossed by that company. I'm kind of like all those nameless people who work in the costuming or makeup or set design for 2022's The Batman. My contribution is like that of all the comic book writers and artists whose various ideas were part of the soup of that film's story. I too, all of us really, either by being a worker or a consumer, or both really, since the privilege of getting to continue existing is something you have to pay for, all of us are apparently also just commodities, are also just resources by which these various companies make obscene profit. In order to appreciate the things that I like, the Batmans, the Gundams, the Ninja Turtles, and Street Fighters, all those things that got me when I was young and that continue to try to pull for me as I age, in order to have access to those things, I must work. In order to produce more of those things that bring me joy, to manufacture and create the stuff that brings me joy, others must also work as I do. They have to continue churning out more and more Batman, more and more Pokemon, more and more Transformers. We can't simply create art or appreciate art for the sake of enrichment and fulfillment. It's all of it just the means by which this great machine that exists to accrue vast profits functions. All of us commodities are just food for the all-consuming galactic horrors that gobble up all the stuff. The wages we earn do not account for those $771 million that the Batman grossed in movie ticket sales. That is how it is under capitalism. We are cogs in the machine, cattle to be corralled, fed, and milked. I'm a nerd, as I keep reiterating, and I caught the nerd bug early on. Sonic the Hedgehog, Pokemon, Star Wars, Invader Zim, Bionicle. I drift in and out of some of this stuff, but I'm a consumer for life. You put a Ninja Turtle or a Batman in it, and I'm gonna fucking watch it. That statement was a bit of an exaggeration, but only a bit. It gets you at a young age, being a nerd does, and it seems like it's determined to keep you for as long as it can. It seems like they'll just keep pumping you for all you're worth. And all your childhoods, from Dragon Ball, which is number 17 on the highest grossing media franchise list, to SpongeBob, number 28, to Paw Patrol, number 54, to My Little Pony, number 67, to Scooby-Doo, number 78. All of your childhoods will be doing much the same. They are manufacturing childhood experiences to turn you into lifetime consumers of their products. They are getting you while you're at your most vulnerable. We're groomed into this. The people investing money into this stuff aren't interested in producing art. They're interested in producing profit. Enriching or inspiring you is of secondary concern. It's a happy accident of pursuing the primary goal of getting money from you. Connecting with you on a fulfilling emotional level is only a goal in so much as it inspires you to come back for more, to come back in pursuit of similar emotional fulfillment whilst selling you more of the same robot toys. It's calculated emotional manipulation. They are leeching off your emotions, trying to manufacture your emotions, trying to collect more and more properties to harvest your emotions with, smothering competing properties so that they can't cut into their customer base, all so that they can get more and more money from you in perpetuity, all so that they can make you a guaranteed source of income. Being a nerd, being a fan of something, when you get right down to it, whether you want to admit it or not, it's kinda like making your commodification into part of your personality. It's making your consumption of particular media a part of your identity. And that's kind of sad and fucked up when you think about it that way. I'm always gonna be a nerd. I don't know if I have it in me to change that. I might lose interest in this or that brand, this or that IP, but being a fan of comics, anime, video games, monster movies, and fantasy roleplay is just how I identify. And I'm not criticizing the lifestyle, nor do I want you to think that I'm saying that there's nothing of value in all your favorite stuff, or that I'm advocating for you to cast off the chains of fandom or whatever. Not at all. Life is short, life is hard, and art is made to be enjoyed and appreciated, and to inspire all kinds of amazing thoughts and ideas and hopes and dreams. I just think it's worth recognizing how there's a business of selling you back your fond memories, of exploiting you for continued profit, of using your joy for selfish ends. And the people who benefit the most from it aren't usually the people who actually put the most work into bringing you that joy. And it's not like it's a secret, everyone knows this shit. But how often do you bother to look this reality in the eye? Someone's getting crazy rich off of all of it. And even the creators, the directors, and the actors, some of whom do live quite comfortably, even they probably aren't in the top 10 people who see the most money from these properties. All the workers in all the many fields out there who work to make the stuff that you need to live are not seeing those massive profits. But someone is. Someone owns the means to our production, and therefore sees the lion's share of the money earned, while everyone else, all the little workers who actually do the work, have to settle for the scraps. They'll continue to gobble up planet after planet. Brands and IPs, so that they can control more and more of the things you buy. And they'll kill Optimus Prime as many times as they need to keep you coming back. Anyways, we're finishing up here. Thanks again for watching ChatBots. Sorry for coming down on all your childhood fandoms. I again don't want you to think that you're doing anything wrong by liking this stuff, because I certainly do too. But I think it's important to acknowledge the reality of these circumstances we find ourselves in. As I said in my Hygog video, if you want to mature with your childhood fandoms, you need to mature in your understanding of them. You can't just keep feeding yourself intellectual baby food. I do these robots so I can convey that notion while also sharing my love for all these goofy cartoons and toys. I do it for the love of it. I genuinely have a passion for this stuff, and I'm not satisfied just going, wow, cool robots. That said though, if you want to help me out, a great way to do that is to like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, comment, and continue watching my stuff. Help turn chatbots into the next successful multimedia franchise. Tune in next time, same bot time, same bot channel, and we'll put together, this one. Alright, sayonara, bye-bye.